My name is H.A. Goodman, and I'm an author, columnist, and journalist. Hit subscribe right now. I am so proud of President Trump. He was not only presidential, he was a leader. He had so much gravitas, so much... tonight was perhaps the best moment of his presidency. He evoked so many emotions from people, and it was a poignant State of the Union. He embodied all the qualities people state that he doesn't have, and it was a breakthrough moment in his presidency. It was a noble, dignified State of the Union. I'm very proud of him. And people who want to denigrate his State of the Union are the same people who are okay with Bernie Sanders being cheated. The same people who are okay with $200 million being funneled from Bernie Sanders voters to purchase the Steele dossier and outsource CrowdStrike, all of these blatantly criminal activities. But the State of the Union was a powerful statement. It was a powerful, strong, much-needed speech reinforcing the values that, I thought Bernie Sanders wanted to uphold in 2016, ending perpetual quagmires. But before we get to that, hit subscribe right now. Definitely check out my Jerusalem Post op-ed below. Why Democrats embrace anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias. Number one. According to the Danish Prime Minister, according to the Danish Prime Minister, Denmark is not a socialist or... Look, according to Lars Rasmussen, Denmark is not a socialist nation. So let's just understand. Let's look at the definition of socialism, okay? Because socialism is viewed as this morally superior economic system. Number one, Bernie Sanders did not run as a socialist. He ran as a democratic socialist. Okay. The emphasis on socialism is something that Vox, when Ezra Klein interviewed Bernie, tried to paint him as. He tried to paint him as a socialist to make him unelectable in 2016 in the beginning of his interview. Bernie immediately shied away from that. You can look, there's an interview with Ezra Klein and Bernie Sanders. I did not write 100 articles in the Hill, the Huffington Post, and Salon. I wasn't called the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet by the Huffington Post. And by the way, every one of my viral articles, from Hillary Clinton is unelectable to, yes, Bernie Sanders is going to win. He would have won in a fair primary, and he would have won the election, actually. I would have been right about that had the DNC not been so corrupt and insidious and cheated him and his voters. But nonetheless, he never... I didn't write those viral articles. The Huffington Post didn't call me the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet. The Washington Post didn't call me the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters because I loved socialism. And I wanted, let's read Socialism, a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Look, there are all different types of economic systems where that could be the definition or that could be linked towards. Denmark, for example, just listen to the Danish Prime Minister, all right? Listen to how he explains the Danish model. Okay, Danish PM Nordic model is not socialist. Just listen to him right now. This is the Prime Minister of Denmark.
I know that that some people in the US associate the Nordic model with some sort of socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. The Nordic model is an expanded welfare state which provides a high level of security for its citizens, but it is also a successful market economy with much freedom to pursue your dreams and live your life.
Okay, so really quickly, if you look at what President Trump said tonight, I'm 5 minutes into this. He's 100% right. America will never be a socialist nation. We'll never be a socialist country. Okay, we have Social Security, we have Medicare, we have social safety nets, but that doesn't make it a socialist system. People say, well, so Medicare for all, Medicare for all. Where's the legislation? Put your money where your mouth is. For once, have the rhetoric. Climate change, climate change. Obama presided over the largest expansion of oil and gas production of any president ever. Put your money. Did he believe in climate change? He obviously didn't care about the largest expansion of fossil fuels ever in American history. He deported more people than any other president ever. So, all the rhetoric does not correlate to 8 years of a Democratic president. Certainly doesn't correlate to the new class of progressive people in Congress and the House, because they're not focusing on any legislation. They haven't drafted, co-sponsored, sponsored any bills regarding a green economy, certainly not Medicare for all. Really quickly, even the Danish Prime Minister says, look, Denmark is not a socialist nation. It's a market economy. But let's take a step back. President Trump is 100% right. First of all, the wonderful socialists and even the anarchists and all the people on the left who hate Trump and who associate Trump with all these nonsensical theories, they should be very happy that he signed a prison reform bill that Van Jones called a miracle, a Christmas miracle. They should all be very happy that President Trump wants to bring home Americans from never-ending quagmires and wars. They should be very happy that President Trump is presiding over an economy with 467,000 manufacturing jobs created, 5.1 million jobs created, as opposed to an economy with President Obama, 303,000 jobs, manufacturing jobs lost, and only 8.9 million jobs created in 8 years. You have 8.9 million jobs created in 8 years, and you have 5.1 million jobs created in 2 years, and you have record low Black and Latino unemployment. It did not start under President Obama. Well, if it started under President Obama, it could have. The trend towards the record low unemployment could have started under President Obama. We're not assured that it would have continued. Why? Because check out the gross domestic product for 2016. It was a paltry, horrific 1.5%, 1.5 or 1.6% GDP growth. And then it went suddenly to over 2%, and then 3% in 2018. Hopefully over 3%. But you're looking at even the Danish Prime Minister saying, look, you know what? We're not a socialist. They're using Denmark, Danish PM in U.S. Denmark is not socialist. After seeing his country held up as an example in the U.S. presidential debate, Danish Prime Minister Lars Rasmussen used an address at Harvard to explain the Nordic model to the U.S., suddenly very interested in Denmark. When people say, well, look at all the industrialized countries have Medicare for all. Yeah, all the industrialized countries, by the way, don't have. How many Americans do we have? How many Americans do we have overseas? We have something like 800 bases. We have 800, the U.S. has bases in 80 countries, 800 formal bases. The United States has approximately 800 formal military bases in 80 countries. Okay, they don't have 800 bases, military bases, Denmark. Okay, that's number one. They don't have thousands and thousands of Americans abroad, fighting in never-ending perpetual quagmires. I wonder why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders can't say, bring home Americans from war. Because it's not sanctioned, that's why. I already know the Democratic Party. That's why my voice is focused on exposing the corruption on the left. Their foreign policy is a max boot Hillary Clinton foreign policy. It is an interventionist foreign policy. Just ask the people of Libya. Obama presided over the destruction of Libya. President Trump is bringing home Americans and presiding over peace between North and South Korea. I think Trump is a far better president, obviously. Obviously. And the Mueller probe and all the nonsense is fabricated, literally fabricated by Clinton and Comey and Brennan and Clapper and all those people, Strzok, Page. They literally stated, Andrew McCabe, James Baker, they literally stated, yeah, we'll stop Trump. It's an admission in the text message to each other. But anyway, you cannot have 800 military bases, and you can't have tens of thousands, I think it's something like 450,000 soldiers abroad throughout the world. I think it's about 450,000 if you, oh, sorry, 165,000. Oh, here we go. Where the 1.3 million U.S. troops are deployed. Sorry, so I was wrong. The U.S. has 1.3 million troops stationed around the world. Here are the major hotspots. So when President Trump, I mean, I'm kind of just touching upon what Trump said. We'll never be a socialist nation. Because there's not as much opportunity in a socialist nation. There isn't as much upward mobility. You are taxed at a too high a rate for upward mobility, especially if you look at Lars Rasmussen, what he said. He wanted to make sure to say, look, you know what? We take care of our citizens, but but people are free to live their dreams, meaning they can start a company, they can engage in a capitalist economy and move up in the world economically. But population, Denmark, population, 5.77 million. Okay, we have 1.3 million troops stationed around the world. The U.S. military has 1.3 million men and women active duty. With why does it say? With more than 450,000 of them stationed overseas. So I was right initially. There you go. 450,000 Americans stationed overseas. 800 military bases. 800 military bases and 450,000 stationed overseas. They have a total population of 5.77 million people. So it's easy to debunk the guilt trip from the usual suspects of progressive pundits who have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of subs, and they repeat the same nonsense all the time. Every other industrialized country, every other leading nation, yeah, they don't have 450,000 Americans overseas and tens of thousands fighting in never-ending conflict that is going on 20 years, which is what President Trump said. You can't have a functioning society with never-ending quagmires. That's one of the reasons, the biggest reason I loved Bernie, loved past tense. It wasn't because of socialism. And if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez loved socialism so much, why doesn't she write legislation, draft legislation, and force Pelosi or introduce legislation, get a vote out on any of the wonderful socialist policies that she thinks are so fantastic? If Medicare for all can save lives, oh, I'm sorry, is it over a month now? Because when I was on RT, the rebuttal was, well, HA, she's only been there for 3 weeks. Well, which one is it? You're going to save people's lives? Are we going? The world going to end? Or are you just a media figure, if you're just there for media, for public relations purposes, then just state that. Don't deceive people. And it's not just AOC, it's Bernie Sanders, it's progressive pundits on YouTube, it's a whole bunch of people. It's Nancy Pelosi, who knows very well they're not going to go and run on 50 to 60 to 70% double to triple tax rates or tax collection. They're not going to do that. They don't even have a tax plan for Medicare for all. But the point is, we have 1.3 million, it says 1.3 million troops stationed around the world. The U.S. military has over 1.3 men and women on active duty, and more than 450,000 of them stationed overseas. And Trump wants to bring home close to 10,000. Trump wants to bring home close to 10,000. And suddenly 25 senators voted against Trump. So even if you were this wonderful socialist or anarchist or, person on the left, and you're so down with all different causes and theories and nonsensical, euphemisms that are linked to the neuroses of people on the left, it's like, if you really cared, if you really think that if you have this little like rose or this little like, there's different symbols on Twitter for people on the left, wouldn't you be 100% on board with President Trump bringing home Americans? We'll never be a socialist nation because of the 25 Democrats and the establishment Republicans who want perpetual war, who voted in the Senate to stop Trump from bringing home Americans. This is Orwellian, which gets us to George Orwell. There's one detractor of mine, the guy's hilarious. He's like, I check good man. Doesn't even understand that, like, George Orwell's a democratic socialist. He'd love Medicare for all. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. His first order of business would be bringing home Americans. So he would side with Trump over Democrats. And he would also not want to blame Russia for cheating in a primary. George Orwell would find Clinton, Pelosi, and even a lot of the progressives in the Democratic Party repulsive, because he would know exactly what's the propaganda, what's going on. Democrats utilize Medicare for all to get votes from the left, to funnel outrage, to funnel the desires and hopes of people, the true believers on the left, who just forget that Bernie Sanders was cheated, or, pretend to care, or whatever, who think that there's no other choice and they can't vote for Orange Man Bad. Then they'd lose all their friends. They couldn't think independently, whatever. But George Orwell would never, ever, ever side with the Democratic Party. And all of that stuff about Trump being a racist, a monster, a bigot, all of these things, if his statements he's made about immigration make him a monster, then Clinton and other Democrats are far worse. It's not whataboutism. That's the stupidest word. It's called hypocrisy. If the paradigm, if your vantage point or your mentality or your philosophy is, or your maxim on life is, anyone who says something racist or does something racist should be shunned, then why did people vote for Clinton, who said and did worse things, called Mahatma Gandhi a gas station attendant? Clinton referred to black youth as super predators who must be brought to heel. Yes, the Democratic nominee who cheated Bernie Sanders. You think George Orwell would vote for anyone like that? He's a democratic socialist. No, genius. He wouldn't have sided with Democrats. You don't know anything about Orwell. Yeah, I do. This whole notion that Trump is this strongman and fascist and authoritarian figure. No, strongmen don't sign prison reform legislation. Authoritarian, dictators don't want to bring home Americans. Bring home Americans. It's Clinton and Bill and Hillary who pushed the crime bill. And then 2 years later, 2 years after the crime bill, she stated that disgusting phrase brought to heel all that stuff. But I mean, President Trump is 100% right. Now, I'm kind of looking at this in terms of, not in terms of the dangers of a socialist nation, because there are dangers. You don't want the government too omnipresent or ubiquitous or, too much a part of your life. Yes, social safety nets are extremely important. You can have that in a capitalist nation. We do. We do. The negatives of capitalism, there are negatives, but it's the best economic system that we have available. It doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean that it's perfect. Of course there are negatives. Of course there's wealth inequality. You know where else there was wealth inequality? In the Soviet Union. I have a friend who in the 80s lived in the Soviet Union, and he told me about the wealth inequality there. He told me if you were part of the Communist Party or if you were, high up, you had access to things that nobody else did. And everybody else was pretty much, the level of poverty was just, most people were living in standards that would be considered poor in the United States of America. But this was in the 80s when the Soviet Union was still, in existence. But the point is, you cannot have... They're not even serious about their alleged value system. And Bernie Sanders, okay, his version of democratic socialism, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's version of democratic socialism, or socialism, is a world that, a government that takes care of its people. Okay, great. A government that implements Medicare for all. Great, where's the legislation? How much are you going to tax people? Are you going to recommend that Americans are brought home so we don't have to pay for never-ending quagmires and wars and all this? Where does the rubber hit the road? Where does the rhetoric meet actual the actions of individuals? They're lying to you. If you happen to be watching this and you're on the left, you need to understand they are lying to you. They are deceiving you. And if you vote Democrat, you are going to continually be deceived. When is the next Medicare for all bill? There was one that Bernie introduced. Nobody voted on it. The CBO is, I believe, looking at it. Congressional Budget Office. They have no tax plan. He didn't explain a 70% top marginal tax rate is not going to pay for it. So you'd have to tax the average American. So what's the plan? The left exists only to pontificate, only to preach. But guess what? Now that I've left Twitter. Even when I was on Twitter, I didn't care about their preaching. But if you need spiritual guidance or moral guidance, or if you want to listen to a preacher or a sermon, you go to a mosque, a synagogue, a church. You don't go to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Pastor Bernie Sanders or Rabbi Bernie Sanders. You don't do that. Okay, I wrote my article in my op-ed in the Huffington Post. Why Democrats embrace anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias. That's just one of the things that make Democrats insidious. Just one of the things. They also cheat. They also try to usher in a new Cold War. They also set up incoming candidates. They also transfer top secret intelligence from Cybernet, JWICs, and SCIFs like Clinton did in an illegal manner. And she got away with it because they covered up her crimes. But the point is, we'll never be a socialist nation. Trump is 100% right. And Cortez and Bernie Sanders are wrong. We know, even if you disagree with me philosophically, where's the... Trump is about the free market. He implemented tax cuts. There are more people working now. There are more jobs than people to fill those jobs. Okay? There are more jobs than people to fill. There's record low Black and Latino unemployment. He's created in 2 years 5.1 million jobs when it took 8 years for 8.9 million jobs. It's very feasible that Trump actually surpasses Obama's job creation. That means less people on social safety nets. It means less people on unemployment. It means more people working. Yeah, it's a capitalist economy that's working well. One of the things I liked about Bernie is that he's pushing breaking up too big to fail banks. Guess who also wanted that? Alan Greenspan. So it's not just this Che Guevara type thing. Oh yeah, another socialist. No. That was a mainstream conservative policy, or at least discussion. So, I mean, you have these people, and they just actively deceive. It's unbelievable. Why isn't Bernie talking about breaking up too big to fail banks? So when there is another crash, and there eventually will be, 10, 20 years from now, maybe sooner, we don't have to pump billions and trillions into banks like we did before. We break them up. Even Alan Greenspan was talking about that. But where's the legislation? He was basically... Bernie can only speak about certain things that are sanctioned by the wonderful people, the wonderful Democratic strategists, sanctioned simply to get people excited. Do you think Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or the wonderful people at The Nation or Mother Jones or Rolling Stone or all these journalists out there, you really think that their goal in life is to implement legislation? You think the Democratic Party is going to roll into 2020 with Biden or Kamala Harris or Beto or even Warren or, yeah, right, Bernie? And if they'll cheat Bernie again because they cheated him once before. But you think they're going to roll in and say, oh, yeah, well, you won't have to pay your premiums, but you know what? Your taxes will go up 20, 30, 40, 50%. Or double or triple, according to the Mercatus study. Oh, and not only that, that's only for Medicare for all. What about a Green New Deal? Oh, and what about abolishing ICE? Oh, what about a $15 minimum wage? Oh, what about free college tuition? Oh, that's actually, I think that's actually economically viable. Because you'd get people starting businesses. That's actually a very good thing. And I don't think it would cost a fraction, maybe 1/100th of what Medicare for all would cost. But anyway, free public college tuition. I don't think that it would cost that. But anyway, they're not serious about it. And even the Danish Prime Minister is like, yeah, we're not a socialist nation. Stop using us as an example. You get this push for socialism because the left has a fetish, the left has an obsession, and I used to be this way as an individual, an obsession with being morally superior. That obsession is just image. They're not morally superior. The left pretty much is morally bankrupt. Most of the left. There are certain individuals who perhaps I disagree with in terms of economic policy now, but there's certain individuals that are genuine. They're few and far between. The left is a giant cult. It's a giant groupthink. Just corrupt club of all different types of factions that hate each other. I mean, it's just hilarious. There are people on the left who think even Bernie Sanders is racist. they're completely dysfunctional. And, I mean, you know what? They're going to lose badly to Trump. And I called this in the beginning of 2017 and actually late 2016. In 2015, I said Clinton couldn't win, and she didn't win. I got the Senate right. Yeah, I got the House wrong, but I didn't realize that people are stupid enough to vote for Democrats who continually lie. They're not going to implement Medicare for all. They're lying to you. They're not going to vote on legislation. They're not going to abolish ICE. They're not going to do anything they promised. So actually, thank goodness that the Democrats won the House, because we get 2 years of Nancy Pelosi, who, by the way, I got to give it up to Nancy Pelosi. She was very respectful, supportive tonight of Trump. I mean, at least respectful of the presidency. And, a lot of the Democrats in the beginning were, applauding Trump. I mean, it was a beautiful speech, and it was everything that the Democrats, claim Trump isn't. But look, I'm all over the place like I usually am this segment, but we'll never be a socialist nation. Trump is 100% right, and there are examples of just failed nations. I mean, the list of failed countries from socialism, it's kind of a word that has so many meanings, but you can look. I mean, literally, I think if you say the name of the country, it's like against YouTube policies. But anyway, country in Latin America that didn't work out. Socialist policies did not work out. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Trump is 100% right. Check out my Jerusalem Post op-ed. Please share that everywhere. And check out HA Second Amendment. Please share those segments as well.